Welcome back. The Department of Homeland Security has a new draft of its FirstSource III solicitation. The agency will use the $10 billion small business contract for IT software and hardware. Soraya Correa is Chief Procurement Officer at the Department of Homeland Security. Soraya, welcome. Great to see you again. What did you and your colleagues at DHS learn from FirstSource II that you're applying to the new edition?
Hey, good morning. Thank you for having me here today. Since FirstSource II was awarded back in 2012, technology has certainly evolved and changed somewhat. So we took into consideration several key factors. First and foremost, cybersecurity. We're obviously going to be including some provisions that impact cybersecurity. We're going to make sure that we take cyber supply chain risk management into consideration as part of our evaluation. We also looked at on-ramping, the ability to continually add sources to the contract to make sure that we stay fresh in terms of the number of companies that we have available, but the types of companies that are providing services and software and hardware under the FirstSource II solicitation. And then streamlining the reporting. Feedback from industry. We obtained a lot of feedback from industry, especially our FirstSource II vendors, as well as those companies that are interested in doing business with the department. And one of the things that we talked quite a bit about was streamlining the reporting requirements, making sure that we streamline not only the reporting post-award, but also even streamlining the proposal submission process. So you can count on that our new solicitation is going to take into consideration many of our procurement innovation lab techniques to streamline the evaluation process, but also making sure that we're only asking for the information that's necessary to conduct a good and solid evaluation.
This solicitation says this, Soraya: DHS understands the FirstSource II pricing approach was extensive and complex and seeks to take a different approach for FirstSource III. What's the different approach that you're going to take in pricing?
It's a great question. So based on the feedback that we received from industry and even from our own personnel internally, what we decided to do was take a more commercial approach to pricing. In other words, looking more at what are the kinds of discounts offered, how the commercial pricing is structured, and stay away from trying to do the pricing at the piece part level. Over.
You talked about on-ramping and the ability for companies to get involved in this, to get on this contract through the life of the contract. Is there an off-ramping issue there too, in case companies, since this is a small business set-aside, become so successful that they don't qualify as small businesses anymore?
Well, I'd hate to say that they become so successful that they don't qualify. Hopefully they will always qualify. But yes, we are looking at off-ramping so that at any point during the course of the life of the contract, we can off-ramp companies who perhaps are not performing well or who have outgrown the requirements of the solicitation. So that's an extremely important piece because we want to keep the companies fresh and viable. And again, I want to emphasize, FirstSource II, the reason it was so successful and the reason FirstSource I was so successful is because this is 100% small business set aside. And we want to make sure those small business dollars go to the small business companies. Over.
How has software buying changed since FirstSource II? One of the major changes is software as a service, licensing versus buying boxes. How do you approach that here?
So here we created the maximum flexibility so that our components have the ability to order software as a service or buy enterprise licenses or even individual licenses. We wanted to provide maximum flexibility because we do use a variety of methods across the government and especially at the Department of Homeland Security. Another key feature in this procurement is we added another North American Industry Classification Code, or NAICS code. We added the Software Publishing Code, and we did that so that we could better track software, actually manage the reporting and tracking of software. So in other words, instead of just having IT value-added resellers NAICS code, we now have a second NAICS code, which is software publishing. And that's going to give us a great deal more flexibility, and it accounts for many changes that the Small Business Administration has made in its rules.
You mentioned you're incorporating elements of that you've learned from the Procurement Innovation Lab in this solicitation. What will that look like to the vendors who are responding to this?
So it should look a little more streamlined. In other words, the process for bidding on the contracts should be a lot simpler. It should go a lot smoother, faster, a little bit more efficient. a little bit more effective, and far more engaging and informative for the vendors. In other words, our Procurement Innovation Lab techniques have focused on only asking for that information which is necessary, using more of a phased approach to the evaluation of proposals so that we can begin to notify unsuccessful vendors as early as possible in the process, and only engage with those vendors that have a likelihood of receiving reward. And most importantly, more engagement with the vendors, making sure that we're communicating on a more recurring basis, not only about the evaluation, but also about the status of the procurement.
Speaking of engagement with vendors, any theme to the comments that you got in the draft solicitation, Soraya?
Sure. So some of the themes, industry was very interested in security requirements that we might impose, because obviously everybody's paying attention to the breaches that are happening out there and all the changes that we're undergoing. So very interested in what we were doing in the area of cybersecurity, contract structure, flexibility, and of course, pricing. Companies were very interested in understanding how we were going to evaluate their technical and their price proposals, as well as how we look to structure the contract and manage it going forward.
Regarding security, are you implementing standards like a FedRAMP standard, a CMMC standard, or something that is internal to the department?
A little bit of both, let me say it that way. We are still looking at the comments that we received from industry and finalizing, and so I don't want to get out ahead of our Chief Information Officer because they have to review the solicitation. But the bottom line is we're incorporating a little bit of both. We want to make sure we protect the interests of the department, but we also protect the companies that are out there working with us.
30 seconds, Soraya. What's the timeline for seeing this on the street?
Our target right now is to issue the solicitation on or about April 20th. We're very excited to get the solicitation out. We're in the final stages of review, and we do expect to hold another industry conference to talk about the solicitation in its final form, probably by the end of April, early May at the latest.
Soraya Correa, thank you very much. Great to have you on the program.
Thank you. Good to be here.